This is Sawyer Robertson, and you're listening to the Bearcast on SicEm365.com.
Welcome into the Bearcast on SicEm365.com. I'm your host, Grayson Grundhoefer. Today, I'm here with Colt Barber, and we are going to preview Baylor's upcoming matchup against SMU coming up this weekend at 11 a.m. on the CW network. SMU, of course, won 11-3 last year. They fell in the first round of the college football playoff, 38-10 against Penn State. They bounced back to start the year against East Texas A&M and won that game 42-13. SMU is currently ranked number 16 in the nation and might even move up following their first win, but they're getting set for a much different test with the Baylor Bears coming to Dallas this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game kind of the opposite trend of Auburn in that no one really knew what to expect because they lost so much. Auburn, talent-wise, was obviously high profile. Everyone was returning on the offensive line, brought in some new guys, brought in a ton of receivers. Then you have SMU, opposite end of the spectrum. They lost so much, and no one really knows. They're getting the respect because of their college football playoff appearance last year. But you look, starting with the offensive line, the receivers, the running back room, they have a quarterback returning, defensive side of the ball, basically just gutted. And that's the reality right now when you start dealing with a lot of 1 year, 2 year players. If you have quick turnover, you're rebuilding pretty quickly. And I'm anxious to see this team. I watched them against East Texas A&M. There were some bright spots, but it's also East Texas A&M. And it's hard to say, what was that 42-13 final score? What lived within that, inside that score. Watching that game, I wasn't thoroughly impressed, but also know it was game one. And two, what exactly was Rhett Lashley wanting to show for his entire team. And there's also some injuries they dealt with against East Texas A&M, some significant injuries that we don't know the status of yet. I doubt we will know or be led on to know much before the beginning of this game on Saturday. But it didn't look too good for Jordan Hudson, their leading receiver, and their returning starting linebacker, Alex Kilgore. And they also had an offensive line injury at the end of the game that we're just kind of uncertain about. But I do like initial take. I like this matchup for Baylor than Auburn. And when you talk about strengths and weaknesses, but just in general, the experience Baylor has coming back, the talent that they faced last week against Auburn going into this game, they've been tested already. And not that they held up extremely well, but that having that first true test early in the season can be beneficial for a game like this.
Definitely can be. It can also be beneficial for SMU because they didn't have to show pretty much anything in this game against East Texas A&M. They also had 2 defensive touchdowns, which certainly skews some things a little bit from a offensive production standpoint and from a scoreboard standpoint. You can kind of take that how you will.
That's a big swing. Yeah. And
it is.
Both of those were within the red zone, within the 10-yard line, big returns for touchdown. Sorry, one on the opposite end, one with East Texas A&M about to score. So that does skew it quite a bit.
Yeah, it does, and takes away opportunities for stats as well. In general, last year, Kevin Jennings, he's their headliner. He's the returning quarterback. Their star, he helped lead this offense to 36.5 points per game, which was 8th in the nation. Jennings completed 65% of his passes, 3,245 yards, 23 passing touchdowns, added on 354 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. But he does have a turnover problem. He had 11 interceptions last year, multiple fumbles as well. Saw him turn the ball over a ton against Penn State last year. This is a guy who is very talented. Dave Aranda compared him to Brock Purdy a little bit in the press conference, just with his ability to get outside the pocket and then make throws down the field when the defense collapses a little bit. I think that's going to be something that's a little different than Baylor's first matchup. I think Jackson Arnold was not looking to get out of the pocket and throw the football. He was looking to run, a very special athlete, much more mobile than Kevin Jennings is. Now, Jennings can hurt you, but he only has 4 career games of over 50 rushing yards. So that's not really that's not his strength.
Yeah.
It's different. And so he's going to look to get outside the pocket and then make throws down the field and hurt you in that way. And that's going to be something that's going to be a little bit different for Baylor in this matchup, even though I understand all the questions we've been getting about, another mobile quarterback, but there are levels to this. And Jackson Arnold is just a different level as far as his ability to run the football and ability to improv while trying to move the chains with his legs. This this kind of commitment to that. Jennings doesn't have that same commitment level. Real quick, Sawyer Robertson has something to remind you about.
Want the latest information about your favorite team? Try out SIGM 365 premium content the next 3 months for just $5 by clicking the link below.
And now back to the Bearcast.
Yeah, and David Aranda hit on this in his press conference. Great informational background on exactly what Jackson Arnold was trying to do, what he does on tape, what he did against Baylor, and then breaking down Kevin Jennings and exactly how he's going to play. And it's a challenge. It is still a challenge, but the thing that stood out to me about what Dave Aranda said was like, you could not really – everybody, and I saw it, and I thought in my mind, why don't you spy Jackson Arnold? Well, at the end of the day, if you go and listen to Dave Aranda, he'll tell you exactly why you can't spy Jackson Arnold in that offense, and it's designed to prevent a spy in the way that they run their scheme. And this week, Dave Aranda openly admitted, yeah, we're going to use a spy. And so, like, that obviously that's not a secret for Rhett Lashley. Everyone probably uses it against Kevin Jennings. And now it's how athletic can you be from the linebacker standpoint to go chase down a quarterback that gets outside the pocket. Kevin Jennings is faster than Shedeur Sanders, but I liken it to a similar way. Like, he's getting outside the pocket to make big throws down the field, dump that little pass over that goes for 25 yards that breaks your back, not necessarily looking to break for 50 yards. But if you have someone that can offset that as a linebacker or whoever you have spying, you might be a nickel back in a lot of situations, but you have that opportunity to do it. You have to take advantage of it. And I don't see SMU's offense right now the same way I did Auburn's. With the offensive line perspective, SMU lost a ton of offensive linemen. Their main three offensive linemen last year were their left tackle, center, and right tackle. Left guard, center, and right tackle. And they were very, very productive. I'm looking back at it now. Let me make sure I have this right. P.J. Williams tackled 967 snaps. Ja'Kai Clark, 922 snaps. Justin Osborne, 914 snaps. That was tackle, center, guard combination. They're all gone this year. So they have to replace a ton on the offensive line.
PJ's back.
PJ is back. He played.
PJ played, and Logan Parr, who is also a very, very good
you're right.
is back as well.
You're right. PJ is back. My bad. Which one was I looking at here? I guess Savion Bird is back.
Ja'Kai is gone.
Ja'Kai is gone. Okay. So Savion Bird, I guess I was thinking PJ was the left tackle. They were fighting. It's been alluded to by Rhett Lashley a few times, so sorry for that mishap about the left tackle. I just assumed P.J. Williams was the left tackle that we're replacing. Sorry about that misinformation. But Savion Bird playing at that left tackle position. Essentially, he did get the start against East Texas A&M, but his offensive line is solid. I think it is very good, especially with the idea that P.J. Williams is coming back. They have a lot of skill positions to replace as well. You know, talk about your leading guy being Jordan Hudson, and now he's potentially out for the game or an extended amount of time. So I'm really anxious to see how this defense stacks up with this group.
Yeah, added a quality center as well in Addison Nichols. So that they've definitely gone out to the transfer portal. They returned 3 pretty good starters. PJ and Logan Parr are the 2 headliners, though. Those 2 guys are very, very good, very strong at the point of attack. I mean, last year, this offensive line was one of the best in the ACC. They ran for nearly 170 yards per game, only allowed 18 sacks last year. So this is going to be a challenge. Like Baylor's going to get pushed again up front, and you can bet SMU's looking at that tape and going to try to exploit Baylor in a lot of the similar ways. I could see them using a ton of misdirection, a ton of counters, and putting guys in motion a lot, because that seemed to confuse Baylor quite a bit against Auburn. I am worried about kind of how Baylor matches up against that offensive line. Jackie Marshall's day-to-day. If he does play, we know he won't be anywhere near 100%. So you're still going to have a drop-off there.
Yeah.
And we saw how the depth looked on the defensive line. That's something Dave Aranda's trying to figure out, because what they did on Friday was not going to work. And it was something he was very disappointed in.
Yeah.
So I think that is an area that SMU holds a distinct advantage. I think it's an area that Baylor's going to have to get better at and put something better on tape than what we saw on Friday. Quickly, the run game is a little different, though. They lost Brashard Smith, who is now a Kansas City Chief. He ran for 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns last year. Also elite receiver at the running back position. So you're losing a guy like that, and now it's running back by committee with Derek McFall, 2 transfers, and Chris Johnson and TJ Harden. It's an interesting group, but a group that is not nearly as strong as it was a year ago with Brashard Smith. And so there's kind of the trade-off, right? I don't think they're going to be as good as Damari Alston and what Auburn had at the running back position along with Jackson Arnold, but I do think the offense line's very good.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's bad. I had that impression that PJ was gone. It's interesting that they didn't flip him. I'm sure it's just a stability thing to keep him a right tackle, fill in behind him. But Savion Byrd pass protection last year was not good. Maybe you set him up to be the left tackle because you have a scrambling quarterback, and that's the ultimate vision for there. And that might be why PJ Williams played the right tackle position. But yeah, they lost a lot of production. Brashard Smith, LJ Johnson comes back. But I don't know that without, LJ Johnson is not there. He's actually at Cal. Sorry, I'm really behind on this right now. Obviously, I've been focused on the Auburn loss, but LJ Johnson's gone. Derek McFall, he did get a lot of snaps. That running back I remember against East Texas A&M. Got plenty of snaps. Talented running back, and I've listened to a ton of Brett Lashley in the offseason and his press conferences. Defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator across the board, and it's just how do we replace the guys that we lost? Roger Daniels was a big piece of that. Got a ton of carries. He's gone. Keyshawn Smith, Jordan Hudson was their dude. But you look up and down this. R.J. Maryland is back. He was a really good tight end, and a lot of coming off of injury. Last year, his production's 359 yards, but that production would have been significantly higher had he not had an injury. So I like their skill position. You have to trust Rhett Lashley as an offensive coach to have a solid team. But this kind of goes back to that Auburn frame of mind. It's like, how quickly can you replace some guys that you lost, and how quickly can this team gel? I wasn't overly impressed with them against East Texas A&M, but that's also it's game one against an opponent you shouldn't have to show much. But I was you mentioned the turnovers by Kevin Jennings. That was flared it reared its head in that game against East Texas A&M already with the fumble and an interception into the end zone. So that will be if Baylor's going to create turnovers against a quarterback this year, they need to show it in this game.
Yeah, Jennings put on a whopping 26 QBR in that game. So he was not good in their first game at all. I look at the receivers. Jordan Hudson is the headliner there, as well as R.J. Maryland, their tight end. Those are the two guys that are kind of their biggest difference makers. But I do think you saw some glimpses of what Romello Brinson brings to the table. He had a big game in their first game, and he was on the team last year and put up some numbers. So he's a good player. Their true freshman, 4-star prospect, Jalen Cooper, who Baylor actually recruited heavily and lost a head-to-head battle for him. He also played and was a factor. So if they don't have Hudson, they still have 3 guys who are pretty good. There's some other guys that Baylor fans might be familiar with. Dylan Goffney is one, Carterius Brown. Like, they got some young guys that they might throw into the mix as well. But I think Brinson, Maryland, Cooper would be the 3 guys that probably will get the most targets if Hudson is not there. If Hudson is there, that changes the math a little bit because he is very good and he's experienced. And so I think that's a big part of the equation as well for their offense.
Yeah, and Brinson is an experienced guy. Started his career at Miami. Interesting career path, though. Didn't play much at Miami. Comes to SMU, has a big year in 23. A solid 28 reception, 431 yards, and 2 scores. And then I don't know if he was injured or what, but then his production fell off the last 2 years, or in 2024 going in this year. But it looks like he's taking that step back. 121 yards in your first game, that you're kind of back on track. So is that a talent deal, or is that the guys in front of him were just significantly more experienced and ready to go? But he looks like he's going to be a playmaker. Baylor's going to be challenged. I mean, there's no doubt that Baylor's going to be challenged offensively. Rhett Lashley does a good job. It's just, what is the difference between what we saw against Auburn and how good is that offense and what SMU is going to put on? We don't know that yet. I mean, we're still 2 games in the season with so many moving pieces, and I'm anxious to see this defense bounce back. I've felt good about this game. I still feel good about this game from a Baylor perspective, but it's going to be a challenge. And if Baylor does not fix things defensively, then it becomes an issue. And truly, you mentioned this in our Auburn recap, we haven't seen what the defensive backs are going to do yet. I mean, they have not been tested. And does SMU lean into the run game like they very well could, or do they say, hey, let's test these defensive backs and see what to do? Baylor's game plan notwithstanding, we don't know what they're going to do yet, but SMU is another team that can challenge you at multiple levels.
They are, and I think SMU is going to challenge their secondary a little bit more. And, Baylor might try to be conservative again with their coverages, and that might lead to them kind of taking what the defense gives them. But they have playmakers to do that. I mean, how many times did Auburn just throw literally a quick read to Eric Singleton just standing directly parallel to the quarterback with no one guarding him and still getting, 5, 6, 7 yards. It's just an extension of the run game if Baylor's going to play that far off. I do think they will try to challenge that, but I also think they're going to challenge Baylor's defense front as well. Now, I don't think they're as physical as Auburn. I really don't.
Yeah.
I really do not think they're going to be as physical. I do not think that Jennings poses the same kind of threat with his legs, especially on those kind of, those read option that turn into QB power type plays, those QB draw plays. He doesn't challenge them to the level that Arnold did. And I think that offensive line had something. Like there was something about watching that offensive line that made me go, man, that they look really good. Like really, really good. You might be looking at one of the better offensive lines in the country in that game. I think this is more like you're looking at one of the better offensive lines in the ACC, which I do think is a little bit different than talking about the entire nation. And so I think there's a chance Baylor does better against the run in this game. I think there's a very good chance of that. But because of that, I do think they will get targeted more in the secondary, which means maybe we'll find out some information about what Baylor's secondary can actually do going forward against a schedule that poses a lot of threats through the air.
Yeah. And a big piece of news in this is that it sounds like Carl Williams is back at practice. And I speculated about this, leading up to the Auburn game. It's like, if Carl's not healthy and not ready to go, do you worry about playing him against Auburn? And maybe that was the ultimate decision. It's like, let's make sure that he's not ready to come in and then take a step back if he plays in this game. And not that he wasn't valuable in that game, but obviously Baylor made a decision game planning wise that their secondary wasn't nearly as important in that game. They with, talking about the two high safeties, et cetera, maybe Carl Williams in that game was kind of like, we made this conscious decision to go in this route and we don't need him as much, and we're going to slowly bring him along. So if he can play this weekend, that's a piece back to the puzzle for Baylor. And when you start talking about losing guys like Devin Turner, Carl Williams, Jackie Marshall, I mean, dude, that's a tough to absorb for this defense that's trying to rebuild and get depth and add guys. But Carl Williams coming back and being able to play, even if it's 25 snaps, is a big deal. And you start talking about SMU needing to replace guys. If he's covering in the slot, whatever he might do in this game is beneficial to Baylor to add them, give them a little bit of a leg up because they didn't have that against Auburn with all the guys that they were missing. So hopefully that's a good piece of this puzzle for Baylor, and he can come back out and play healthy.
Yeah, I don't see how he comes back and doesn't start at field safety. The more that I hope this, I just don't. I don't see how you can go out there and show that little confidence in your safety position, and then you bring a big piece of the puzzle back and you don't play him at the position that it seems like you have kind of the least confidence in. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to grasp here, because if they bring him back and just play him at star, it feels like it doesn't change a whole lot. I mean, Carl might be better in coverage than the guys that they have, but I don't know that he's that much better against the run. I don't know that he's that much better. Like, I think the upgrade for him to play field safety feels like it would be more impactful than him playing star. That's what it feels like to me.
I fully agree. And I feel like that you have enough speed at linebacker right now to say, okay, yeah, we're going to sacrifice his ability to cover, but we're going to play with Keaton Thomas, potentially Phoenix Jackson at our linebacker positions, and they can be extremely fast and play sideline to sideline from both positions that Baylor has not had. And not that Kylan Reed and Travion Barnes are going to play, but I think speed-wise, those are your best options. So dropping Carl back and playing that free safety position makes the most sense, especially if let's put it out there. I mean, DJ Coleman through his last two games against LSU and Auburn has played admirably well, and he's not a glaring. This isn't somebody chasing receivers around the field and just can't play. He can play the run. Like, he's played admirable. Kendrick Simpkins made arguably the biggest defensive play that Baylor had. Unfortunately, they didn't get the turnover, but he forced a turnover, or forced a fumble, forced a rush pass by Jackson Arnold that should have turned into a turnover. So like they have playmakers there that I don't think they have at the deep safety or the field safety position. And Carl being back there would make a ton of sense. But I feel like we've been talking about this for 3 years. Is it going to happen? I don't know. But they might just think he's too valuable at star or at the nickel position, and they don't use him there. Something's got to give, though. Like, it's got to give for that position. And if he's coming back, you have to figure out what makes your defense the best possible defense. And DJ Coleman, Kendrick Simpkins, and Carl Williams being on the field together in my mind, you figure out how to get them on the field, at least two of the three together at all times.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Okay, let's flip over to SMU on the defensive side. So last year they gave up 22 points per game. They were actually really good on
Yeah,
defense,
very
and
good defense.
specifically, they were really good up front. I mean, their defensive line was awesome. Their linebackers were really good, but this year they lose basically every meaningful player on their defensive line except for Cameron Robertson, who is a beast. He's very, very good. He's going to be a monster for them this year. But everyone else they lose, they brought in 8 transfers on the defensive line.
Yeah.
So completely revamping everything up front. And that kind of also trickled to the linebacker. They lost a lot at linebacker. They lost their starting nickel. The only guy they returned there is Alex Kilgore. So there is a step back there. You mentioned Kilgore got injured as well. So if he doesn't play, I mean, you're talking about breaking in potentially, 6 new guys aside from Robertson in your front 7. That's a lot to replace in a matchup that Baylor's going to try to target. Baylor's going to try to get their run game going again, and this feels like a good matchup for that.
Yeah, I mean, and that was even preseason. You kind of saw that, or at least if you watch closely. And transfer portal notwithstanding, like you start adding guys from the transfer portal, and you don't know what you're going to get. But this group is unlike Auburn in that they didn't return essentially any production. They didn't return any snaps in terms of the defensive line. Where you look at defense, Keldrick Falk, they're 2 interior guys for Auburn. Like they had some dudes coming back, and they just supplemented behind them. This doesn't feel that same way. So what do you get from this group that was really good a year ago? I really like their defensive coordinator and listening to him over the offseason. But SMU, Baylor are much more similar in terms of overall talent. And that was the differentiator between Baylor and Auburn in my mind. I don't see it the same way. Like you want old dudes, you want experienced dudes. And right now, Baylor has that in terms of offensive line versus their defensive line. And I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. They only allowed 100 rushing yards per game last year, had a bunch of sacks. I mean, they were really, really good last year. And so I expect a big step back. I expect Baylor to actually be able to run the football really effectively. I think one of my takeaways from the Baylor-Auburn game is I'm not going to overreact to the fact that Baylor couldn't run the football in that game. I think they're going to be able to run the football on pretty much everyone they play. Let's also not forget that stats can skew things as well. They were a holding call away from Bryson Washington having 100 yards a day. So again, those are things that you can't really account for consistently. No, they weren't good enough. I understand that, but I do have hope that they're going to be a lot better going forward. East Texas A&M ran for 3.1 yards per carry. 107 yards on the ground, but they threw for 244 yards, which was kind of intriguing to me. The reason it was intriguing is because SMU's secondary is supposed to be their best unit this year. Their secondary is supposed to be really good. They don't lose a ton. They only lose 2 guys back there. And so it's an area that I do think they will be pretty good, but it's also an area that didn't really play that great in this first game. They forced some inefficiencies, but they gave up yards kind of time and time again.
Yeah. When you lose those guys in the front, the playing behind them is becoming more of a challenge. And in this particular game, when East Texas A&M made a quarterback change, the quarterback that was originally started this game struggled. But Eric Rodriguez came in. I'm looking at the stats. I didn't even know his name before this game, but he came in and he made a lot of plays in the passing game. I mean, he was 14 of 30, not great numbers, but for 191 yards. That's 12, 13 yards per completion. Not a great, not anything crazy yards per attempt, but yards per completion. When he was completing passes, they were getting chunk yards. And that was throughout the game. Like that was from start to finish. It wasn't all in garbage time. Once he entered the game, he was moving the ball up and down the field. And even their rushing numbers. I mean, I saw specifically on both sides of the ball, there was a lot of stalemates between the offensive and defensive lines in this game. A lot of plays right at the line of scrimmage that didn't go either way for both teams. And that was, for me, I thought that was a telling point for what SMU specifically lost on the defensive line. Because last year, the havoc plays that they created throughout the entire season, I don't even know what their tackles for loss, sack ultimate numbers were for the season. But the production that they lost, you look at the production, the numbers individually they lost, every guy was like 7 sacks, 6.5 sacks. It was tackles for loss, 10 tackles. It was just everywhere. And now they're gone. So in game 2, can they take a big step forward? I just didn't see anything against East Texas A&M that makes me worried. But again, it's game one. I think Baylor's going to be able to run the football, throw the football. I mean, man, SMU might be excited about, some guys coming back there, but if it's as much of a challenge as what Auburn presented, I mean, I'll be surprised. And Baylor did fairly well against Auburn throwing the football. I don't think those is much for Sawyer. I don't think he's throwing for 400 plus yards in this game unless Baylor just can't absolutely not run the football again. Then that number gets heavy. They start, throwing a lot of pass attempts in that game. But I think Baylor's rushing game gets back on track, and those numbers for passing, if need be, can be really big again.
That would be a huge red flag. If Baylor can't run in this game, then you're going to have a hard time pointing to many games that they're going to be able to run the football.
Yeah.
And I know
scary.
SMU can replenish talent. I know they can bring in transfers, but this is not a defensive line that should be holding Baylor under, I'd probably say 175 yards on the ground. They shouldn't.
You would think,
Now, we'll see. You got to go out there and do it because Baylor definitely didn't do it in week one, and there wasn't a lot of confidence to gain from that. But I also think this offense line is going to show up in this game and start, hitting the SMU defense line and being like, "Oh, this is different. This is different than what I just saw."
And I think that's I mean, we talk about the SEC and talent and all this different, is the SEC overrated, blah, blah, blah. Most of the time, the SEC talent-wise is that's not the issue. It's always Auburn underachieving based according to their talent, or Texas A&M underachieving based on their talent. It's never a talent deal. The talent's there. It's just, can you play up to that? And that was never an issue. I just think this Auburn's talent level, the depth that they had. I mean, they returned guys across the line. They brought in guys that were big and strong as backups, and that showed itself in that game. Right now, I don't see that with SMU. And that's nothing against SMU. Everyone goes through these phases. They were elite last year. I just don't see it right now from them, especially when you're considering they're going to, like Jeffrey, however you say his name, Mball from Purdue was a big addition. I really liked him out of the portal, but that's one guy. What can you do schematically to take advantage of one guy? They're going to have other guys, but I'm just using that as an example. Like, they lost a lot last year. Can it be replaced this early in the season?
Right. I do think their secondary is pretty good, though. And I think
I'm talking about the front seven specifically. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm more so mean if Baylor's not running the football and it's the same game plan as the Auburn game, I do think you will run into some problems. I know Sawyer didn't throw any interceptions. I know he took care of the football, but the way he was getting hit, the way he was getting chased down, I mean, there were a lot of opportunities for turnovers in that game. And so it is something that would concern me again if you're just dropping back and trying to throw the ball all over the place and not being able to run the football. And as we saw game one, SMU has 2 defensive touchdowns already this season. And so they will take advantage of it. I like their safeties. Isaiah Nokobia, Texas kid, really good player. He's grown into a very good one. Ahmad Moses is their veteran at safety as well. Another good one. Deuce Harmon, their senior cornerback, was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. So they have a lot of talent out there, and they got a lot of guys that do make me a little scared if you're going to ask Sawyer to throw the ball, 47, 50 times in a game. You'd like that number to get down into the 30s because you're running the ball so efficiently. I really just think that the big thing for Sawyer as far as, how does this passing game keep going and keep clicking and sustaining drives is really, he's just got to be able to hit the layups. He missed on a couple of those layups in this game, especially on those passes to Bryson Washington, missed one to Michael Trigg that felt like a layup, even though it was like a 15-yard throw. But those type of things, I think, will get cleaned up as the season progresses. But those are the ones that you really need to hit on in a game like this because you got to stay ahead of the chains. Baylor wasn't really ahead of the chains in a lot of that game against Auburn, and it put them in really tough situations. Now, they were able to overcome that to some extent, but I don't think that's a formula for success, especially going on the road.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's what gives you the most hope. You look at that in terms of offensive production for Baylor against Auburn. They're put in a lot of tough situations, and they're able to overcome those. So what happens when they are ahead of the sticks? What happens when that run game provides balance? Maybe that never comes. Maybe that's just, last year, the final 6 games were an anomaly. They can't replicate that again. I don't think that's the case, but maybe it is. And the passing the ball becomes more of a challenge. But if and when that returns, that balance, you establish the line of scrimmage, I think that you're going to see this offense go to another level. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. That's the hope. And I think, you have doubts after you leave the Auburn game for obvious reasons of can that return. I feel pretty good. I mean, you don't return 4 or 5 starting offensive linemen, basically all of your production at receiver, not all of it, but leading production at receiver, running back, and obviously your starting quarterback, and then just forget how to do it. I think teams game plan against you differently. I think that you'll see a good game plan from SMU. But I just think that it's coming, and you hope and need it to be this weekend. You can't wait another week to say, oh, we get right against Stanford. You need to find a running game this week. Like that's the end of it. Like SMU is going to be there. They sacked the East Texas A&M quarterbacks 3 times, so I don't know what those final negative yardage were in rushing. But if East Texas A&M rushed for 107 yards against SMU, some of that was garbage time, whatever. But like, you better surpass that. Like if 200 yards isn't within your reach at the end of the game, I think you have to be pretty frustrated. And I think you're right. Over 175 is on the table. If you're not there, the rest of the season could be pretty long against some of these fronts they're going to play, especially when you talk about Arizona State. Kansas State, even though they haven't looked great, is out there. They looked really bad, speaking of, against their rushing defense looked really bad. But you have Utah, and there's a few other teams in there that just says we can. Yeah, Cincinnati's showing it with Corleone. Like he's a beast on the interior. So there's going to be some matchup problems. So if you can't do it against SMU, you're probably not doing it for the majority of the rest of the season. That's a scary thought.
With that. Yeah, because if you can't run in this game, I mean, you might not be able to run against Houston. You might not there's very few games that you're going to be able to look at and be like, yeah, they're going to run the football really well. And the bigger thing is like you lose this game and you fall to that they're going to beat Stanford. So 1-2. I mean, you are at risk of just a couple blown chances here and there, and you could be sitting at 1-5. Like you could be. I don't think they will be, but it would be in play with a matchup against Arizona State. You go on the road to Oklahoma State, and then you got to face K-State,
and then TCU. I mean, shoot.
TCU, it gets.
We talked about that Auburn game being an important game, and it was, but I always felt like it's kind of if you win it, your ceiling's much higher. I got in my preseason predictions, I said 9-3. They split between Auburn and Arizona State. And that's how I still feel. Like I still think that that's on the table. But this SMU game, I didn't consider a toss-up based on everything that SMU lost and how that you listen to their coach and say, man, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work. We have a lot of new guys. We have 45 new players on our roster. This is not a game Baylor can afford to lose. And Dave Aranda said in his press conference, he said, we feel the pressure to win this game. We want fans there, Baylor fans in Dallas, and to support us in this game. When he was asked about it, this wasn't just an indirect comment, but he was asked about it. But it's like they feel it, and that's good. He needs to feel that. This team needs to feel that. But that just kind of tells you where this game is, and it has been on my mind. It's like you can't lose this game. I don't care. This is not an intimidating home field advantage for SMU. There's going to be a lot of Baylor fans there. Even if there wasn't a lot of Baylor fans there, SMU is going to show up, but it's not going to be intimidating. It's going to be what it is, and I hate that because that's what a lot of people say about Baylor. Auburn fans, this is not a big deal, but that's the reality. Like you play in front of these 70,000, 80,000, you come to Waco, it's not a big deal. Same for Baylor. Baylor should not be intimidated by this atmosphere. This is a game you go in, take care of business, and win, and they should do that. I hate that I feel that way, but I feel that way about this game. If Baylor loses this game, it's not good for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I do think that of the two, I mentioned this early in the season, I felt like the Auburn game was the game that they were more likely to lose by a lot. Like it really wasn't that close for me. I think I had Baylor winning this one by 2 touchdowns going into it, going into the season. So that's a lot of confidence. And trust me when I say I'm not trying to slight SMU, because I do know what I just saw the first week of the season, and there's a non-zero chance that SMU beats Baylor by a couple scores. Like it's very possible.
Yeah, sure.
I could see it happening if Baylor continues to not stop the run and not run the football, they're going to be in trouble again. And so this is kind of where I'm not trying to downplay them too much. They are a ranked team. This would be a big win for Baylor if they got this win. This is not a gimme. This is not a sure thing, but the matchups favor Baylor. The matchups are there for Baylor to take advantage of in this game. And I do think if this is a team that has any Big 12 title aspirations, that has any, just a season to look forward to type vibe to it, you win this game especially off of a loss. You're the team that's more disappointed. You're the team that's more hungry. You should be the more physical team. You should be the team that has more to play for, that has the chip on their shoulder. And if they're not, that's extremely disappointing. And that leads me back to what I just said of, you got a tough schedule coming up. And if you're not hungry and ready to play for this game, you are going to have some very tough days ahead of you, I feel like, in Big 12 play.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the Auburn game, and I know like that's our data point right now. You know, the same way East Texas A&M is for SMU. It's a new, fresh season, so that's our data point. And I want to talk about this for a second. I never felt like Baylor just didn't care in that game, and I know that's a weird thing to say, but I think that they were ready to play that football game. I think that they came out, slow starts, blah, 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 all this stuff that we talked about. You know, how can they start faster, not get down by 4? And they did. They got down 17-3, but it didn't feel like that. And maybe that because Baylor came out, they got to stop defensively. Their offense moved the football. The issue was they didn't score. They didn't go up 14-0 when they very well could have gone up 14-0. But I never felt like this team did not play physical, did not play hard. And I think that translates. And I think that you're going to see that be a persistent thing throughout this season. And just because they got overmatched in areas by Auburn does not mean that they're incapable of overmatching other opponents. And I think that if they continue to play hard and they continue to play physical and fast, that even though Colin Reed over pursues over and over, but he's playing aggressive, and those other things can be coached. The athletic ability is there. Same with Keaton Thomas, Phoenix Jackson, go up and down the list. I would rather them play like that in game one and make mistakes rather than not have the capability or showing that physical nature. So I'm excited to see them in this game because of that. I never got that overwhelmed feeling, and that was at times 23 and then on occasion 24. There were those moments where you felt like they were overwhelmed a little bit, and I didn't see that against Auburn, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. That there was no quit for sure, but it still was a slow start. And it still was a slow start in a big game.
I think a different way. I think like there was not that key defining moment of, oh crap, like we gave up, a 75-yard touchdown. We threw an interception. They didn't execute in the red zone, and that was the problem.
And I would say that's part of it, though. Getting stuffed in the red zone on your home field, that is a part of it. It's in the equation.
It is.
Yeah.
To me, that's an game one execution rather than just not being ready to play. I think that's where I differentiate. Like, I didn't ever get the sense that this team was not ready for the moment or not ready to play. I think they were ready for the moment and ready to play. And whereas in the past, slow starts were the opposite of that. BYU game last year, a great example of this team just didn't feel like they were ready to play. I think that they had a hangover effect from the previous week, and you go into that game and struggle. This game, it was a different type of execution slow start rather than are we ready to play slow start.
So in LSU, slow start because you threw a pick six.
Yeah, I think that they're not data points, but it's a intangible difference of why did that slow start occur. I did not feel like this team was just too not ready for the moment. The moment was I didn't feel that at all, and I think that you could have said that in the case the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think they got off to a good initial start. And then it fizzled. And so then you look up the score and it's still 17-3. So same outcome, different way it happened for sure.
And they didn't let the game get away. I mean, 17-10 at the end of the half. I mean, they played 17-10 through the middle of the third quarter. They didn't let that game get away from them, and they didn't win. At the end of the day, they didn't win. But I think it just sets up the season differently mentally for me. And that's probably why I left that game feeling differently than them saying, hey, it was 31-10, but we made it the 38-24 game, right? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like that, like BYU last year, what was the score? 27-3, 28-3. Like that's
they
much
almost
different.
Came back.
It much different vibes though. Like to me, like yeah, we can be down and frustrated, but that was a much different, initial start versus coming back in this game. Iowa State, more like the Iowa State game, kind of when you felt good, really good through 3.5 quarters, and then Iowa State goes on their run. But I just there was something different about that. I think you have guys settle in, Phoenix Jackson, Colin Reed, linebacker specific position, but I think some of those guys will settle in a little bit nicer and moving forward. I mean, we'll see this weekend.
I think it will. I do think these guys will have an opportunity to start better. And honestly, it's kind of crazy, but it feels like these past few years for Baylor under Dave Aranda, they've been better in a lot of ways on the road.
Yeah,
So
true.
I
That's
think
very
that
true.
this could be kind of just another data point in that direction. I'm not going to say unfortunately, but it is a little unfortunate because winning those games in front of your home crowd, they
They're
just
big.
mean more. They just do. But in the case of this year, I mean, winning this game would do a lot. And again, you win this game, you beat Samford, and you're 2-1 going into the Arizona State game, and you get another opportunity. You get another chance, right, to have this huge game, all the fans showing up. Probably a big noon kickoff type game, most likely, maybe somewhere around there. We'll see how Arizona State does, but you get another chance if you're able to get to that point at 2-1. If you get to that point at 1-2, it's just kind of like you're just fighting to survive and start Big 12.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure in that game. I mean, you go 1-2 in these first. You go in Arizona State with staring 1-3 in the face. That's a tough spot to be in against the returning Big 12 champions and a team that should have potentially won a college football playoff game. So not an easy schedule. We've known that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Colt, now that we're at the end of the show, what is your prediction for Baylor versus SMU on Saturday?
Man, why are we doing these so early in the week now? These predictions, you catch me off guard. Considering SMU scored 2 defensive touchdowns in that game, I'm going to pull this up really quick before I start talking about that too much. It was 42. Give me a second. 42-13. East XM had 3 red zone trips that they didn't score on. 2 of them turnovers. 1 a missed field goal. SMU had 2 defensive touchdowns in that game. So I'm not basing it solely off that game, but just like I say for Auburn, this is a data point that we have. SMU, when you watch that game against East XM, never felt like they were just a superior team. You say that when they play, let's say Texas State, much different vibe if it's Texas State. This is East Texas A&M. They just transitioned to Division I football. This is their first year they're eligible for postseason, and so if SMU was superior talented within their scheme, they, regardless of all the transition that they had, I think that game looks much differently. It's game 1. It's not going to be as clean. I don't think SMU is ready for Baylor's offense, for one, because of that matchup. And I think Baylor's defense bounces back, considering and including if Jordan Hudson is out of that game for SMU at the receiver position. I think he's a pretty big factor. So I really like Kevin Jennings, but I like the way Baylor matches up. And as close as Baylor was to scoring, they missed 2 red zone opportunities in that game that should have been scores. That's more like 38 points for Baylor. I mean, that to me, I know they didn't score, but I think against this SMU defense, those are scores. So I'm in the 38, 31 type range favoring Baylor, maybe 38, 28. And I don't know that the SMU's offense is really that good, but I also don't trust Baylor's defense as much right now. So I'm going in that 38, 31 range, maybe a 10-point win if things go well. And that's a big prediction. I mean, they're favored by 3 points right now. FBI has them winning these games, which is flawed this early in the season. But I like Baylor in this game a lot.
I like the matchups as well for Baylor going into this game. I think SMU is going to put up points. I don't trust Baylor's defense at all right now. That there's a lot that they have to prove before they kind of earn that trust. And so I think that because of that, I think SMU is probably going to score 30-plus points. So I'm going to go with 31 points for SMU. Now, on the flip side, I think Baylor's going to run this football and run the football and run the football and continue to run the football. I think Bryson Washington and Caden Knighton are going to have much different days than they did against Auburn. I think Sawyer Robertson's going to continue to stay in sync with the receivers. I think they're going to move the ball pretty efficiently in this game. I think it's also going to be an offense that's going to be very focused on making sure that what happened against Auburn doesn't happen again. I think Mason Miller will have that offensive line rolling in this one as well. They're going to move the ball a lot. I think they're going to score a lot of points. As far as the defense goes, I think Baylor's going to continue to give up a lot of chunks on the ground, going to continue to give up space up front. And then I think they're going to get hit a little bit more in the secondary than they were in this first game against Auburn. So I ultimately, I have a final score of Baylor winning this one 41-31. I think it'll be very high scoring. I think both these teams have a lot of flaws on the defensive side, but I trust both these offenses to score some points. This could be a game that comes down to just a few turnovers, comes down to, who wins on those third down plays more, who wins on those fourth down plays, because we'll probably see a lot of them between these two teams.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to take Baylor because I trust the offense just a little bit more, and it's a bounce back spot for them. I think they're going to be the hungrier team. So, yeah, I got Baylor 41-31.
Yeah, and I think it's fair. And honestly, we're several days away from this game right now, and we're making an early week prediction, and there's a lot more that goes into this. But I think that saying that Baylor's depth at receiver is the ultimate difference, and including Michael Trigg in that. Because if you like SMU's top two corners, I don't know what's behind them. Like I haven't done that much research. Obviously, I started this off by saying that they have an offensive lineman gone that's not gone. But I think that Baylor's depth at receiver is going to be an issue for everyone this year. I think that in this game specifically is going to be an issue because who at SMU safety, your top three guys are pretty good. But when Baylor rolls, Rice and Washington out there with three receivers and Trigg, who's guarding the second, Trigg and the other receiver when you're also trying to stop the run? And I think that's the conundrum that a lot of people are going to be in this year. And I think it plays out in this game. If you're trying to outscore somebody and you have a fourth guy like Trigg, potentially, if you call him your fourth, I don't even call him your fourth at this point. And then a third guy like Josh Cameron was, or Kobe Prentice was, or, Lewis Brown. Like, we haven't seen Lewis Brown yet and everything we've heard about him. So I think that Sawyer gives you such a decided advantage of, I have so many weapons that I don't really care. I'm just going to find the guy that's your worst matchup, and I'm going to go take advantage of it. Auburn didn't know about that about Cole Wilson, and he blasted him. So what decision does SMU make? Who's guarding who in this game? Because Sawyer Robertson's going to find them, especially if the run game's working. Then becomes, and I think that's the difference in this game, is Baylor's offensive firepower is going to put them in situations where they don't know who to cover. And then it's ultimately going to either lead to a lot of rushing yards from Bryson Washington and Caden Knighton, or they're going to throw the ball over the yard again.
And Baylor definitely wants it to be that those safeties and secondary guys are also having to shed a bunch of blocks and tackle Bryson Washington in the open field numerous times, because that'll wear on you a lot as well. And again, I think that just makes things a lot easier for Baylor in the passing game, a lot easier for Sawyer Robertson if you actually have a threat to run the football, which I do believe they will have going into this game. That's it for today. Baylor's traveling to Dallas to take on SMU at 11 a.m. on the CW network on Saturday. Be sure to check that out. Colt, Barber, and I will be back later this week to do a premium mailbag. So if you're not a Sikkim 365 premium subscriber, check that out. We'll give you all kinds of insight that we have into the program over the course of the week. But thanks for listening today. This has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.
Join Sikkim 365 Premium on a $1 for 1 month trial to read our experts' notes and insights. Know about high school commits, off-season transfers, coaching staff changes, and so much more before the rest. Also, download the Sikkim 365 app on your iPhone today to get instant notifications of breaking news, read up on the latest inside info, easily interact with other Baylor fans on our forums, and get alerts for anything published by your favorite staff members.